Your next flight just got $800 more expensive and you do not even know it yet. While you were sleeping, Canada did something no country has ever done to the United States. They locked the door to the sky. The entire northern airspace, the route every American airline depends on to reach Europe, Asia, and the rest of the world, is now either restricted or priced so high it might as well be closed. We are talking about billions of dollars vanishing from the American economy every single week. Your summer vacation, your Amazon packages, your job, all of it is about to feel this. And the worst part, the man sitting in the Oval Office has no idea how to fix it. If you are not subscribed to this channel, do it right now because this story is changing by the hour and you cannot afford to miss what comes next. So what exactly happened? Let me break this down in a way that actually makes sense. At 8 in the morning Eastern Time, Transport Canada, that is their version of the Federal Aviation Administration, quietly released a notice to air missions. No press conference, no dramatic announcement, just a document. But inside that document was a decision that sent shockwaves through every airline boardroom in America. Effective immediately, the preferential overflight rights that United States carriers have enjoyed for decades are suspended. Any nation currently engaged in what Canada defines as hostile trade actions will face new restrictions and massive fee increases on polar route access. Now, let me tell you why that matters more than anything else you will hear today. Pull up a globe, not a flat map, a globe. When a plane flies from New York to Tokyo, it does not fly sideways across the Pacific. It flies north, straight up over Canada, over the Arctic, and down into Japan. That is the shortest path. That is the path that saves fuel, saves time, and saves the airlines hundreds of millions of dollars every single year. The same is true for flights from Chicago to London, from Los Angeles to Frankfurt, from Atlanta to Beijing. Nearly every major international route out of the United States crosses Canadian airspace. It is not optional. It is physics. The Earth is round and Canada sits on top of North America like a cap. You cannot get to the other side of the planet efficiently without going through that cap. So when Canada says your planes are no longer welcome on the short route, they are not just being difficult. They are fundamentally breaking the math that holds the American airline industry together. Without Canadian airspace, United States carriers have to fly south the long way around. A flight that used to take 13 hours now takes 17 or 18. Planes burn thousands of extra gallons of jet fuel. Crew members hit their legal flight time limits, and the airline has to swap in a new crew or add a refueling stop in places like Anchorage or Honolulu. Direct flights become layovers, schedules collapse, and every single one of those extra costs gets passed down to one person. You, the passenger, the consumer, the American taxpayer who did not ask for any of this. Early estimates from aviation analysts are staggering. We are looking at potential losses of $3 to $4 billion per week across the United States aviation and cargo sector. That is not a typo. Per week. And this is just day one. But here is what nobody is telling you. This is not really about planes. This is about something much bigger. Stay with me. To understand why Canada holds all the cards right now, you need to understand something most Americans were never taught: the geography of power. We grow up looking at flat maps where the United States sits in the center, big and dominant. But that map is a lie. On a real globe, Canada is not just our neighbor. Canada is our ceiling. It stretches from the Atlantic to the Pacific and all the way up to the Arctic Circle. Every efficient flight path from the United States to Europe, to Asia, to the Middle East passes through Canadian-controlled airspace. There is no workaround. There is no alternative, and that is not a new problem. That is a 70-year-old dependency that America chose to ignore. Let me take you back to 1944. The world was still at war when diplomats gathered in Chicago to hammer out the rules of international aviation. The result was the Convention on International Civil Aviation, one of the most important agreements most people have never heard of. It established that every country has complete and exclusive sovereignty over the airspace above its territory, not partial, not shared, complete. That means Canada does not owe the United States a single inch of sky. Every flight that crosses Canadian airspace does so because Canada allows it. For decades, that permission was given freely under a series of bilateral agreements. The United States and Canada were allies, partners, friends. The assumption in Washington was that this would never change, that Canada would always say yes. That assumption was the foundation of American aviation dominance, and Mark Carney just pulled it out from under them. Think of it this way. America built a global transportation empire on borrowed airspace. For 70 years, the rent was cheap and the landlord was friendly. So friendly that Washington forgot they were renting at all. They started acting like they owned the place. They slapped tariffs on Canadian steel. They threatened Canadian lumber industries. They insulted Canadian leadership on the world stage. And the whole time, they never once looked up and realized that the roof over their head belonged to someone else. Well, the landlord just raised the rent, and not by a little, by so much that the tenants cannot afford to stay. What makes this so devastating is that there is no construction project, no technological innovation, no amount of money that can change the geography. You cannot move Canada. You cannot build a new Arctic. You cannot invent a flight path that somehow avoids the largest country in the Western Hemisphere. The Earth is round. Canada is on top. And for the first time in modern history, Canada is using that position as a weapon, not a bullet, not a bomb, just a fee schedule and a sovereignty review. And it is the most powerful move anyone has made against the United States in decades. And that brings us to the man behind all of this, and why he might be the most dangerous opponent Donald Trump has ever faced. If you think this was some emotional reaction from a frustrated politician, you do not understand who Mark Carney is. This man does not do emotion. He does math. Before he became prime minister, Carney ran the Bank of Canada through the 2008 financial crisis. While every other major economy was collapsing, Canada's banking system held. That was not luck. That was Carney. He saw the risk before anyone else, and he built the walls before the flood hit. Then the British government did something almost unprecedented. They hired a foreigner to run the Bank of England. Think about that. The United Kingdom, one of the proudest nations on earth, looked around the world for the best financial mind they could find, and they chose a Canadian. Carney spent 7 years in London steering the British economy through Brexit chaos. He sat across the table from the most powerful bankers, politicians, and strategists on the planet. He learned how systems break. More importantly, he learned how to break systems on purpose when he needed to. Now, here is what separates Carney from every other leader Trump has gone up against. Trump's playbook is intimidation. He raises his voice. He threatens tariffs. He calls people names on social media at 3 a.m. And for years it worked because most politicians are terrified of bad headlines. They fold, they apologize, they give Trump what he wants just to make the noise stop. Carney is not most politicians. Carney is a central banker. Central bankers do not respond to noise. They respond to data. When Trump started escalating the trade war, Carney did not fire back with insults. He did not hold press conferences. He went quiet. And in that silence, he was calculating, mapping every dependency, measuring every leverage point, waiting for the exact moment when one surgical move would cause maximum damage with minimum effort. And that is exactly what he did. One document, one policy revision. No drama, no shouting. Just a piece of paper that rerouted the entire American aviation system overnight. But here is what people are missing, and this is critical. Carney took a massive gamble. This is not risk-free for Canada. If Trump retaliates by banning Air Canada from American airports or by cutting Canadian imports entirely, the Canadian economy takes a hit too. Carney knows this. He calculated that the pain America would feel is 10 times worse than anything Canada would absorb. He bet that the American business community would crack before the Canadian public does. And so far, looking at the airline stocks in free fall and the emergency meetings on Capitol Hill, it looks like he was right. But here is what really scares the White House. It is not the airspace, it is what comes after the airspace. Let me bring this down to your kitchen table because this is where it gets personal. You might be watching this thinking, I do not fly internationally. This does not affect me. You are wrong. This affects every single American, and it is going to hit you in places you do not expect. Start with the obvious, flights. If you had plans to fly anywhere this summer, start recalculating your budget. Airlines are already projecting fare increases of 30 to 40% on transatlantic and trans-Pacific routes. That trip to London you were planning for your family, add another $2,000. That business trip to Tokyo your company was sending you on, your boss is already asking if a Zoom call will work instead. But that is just the beginning. Now think about what flies over Canada that is not carrying passengers. Cargo. Every single day, thousands of FedEx, UPS, and DHL flights cross Canadian airspace, carrying everything from electronics to medical supplies to auto parts. When those planes have to fly the long way around, they burn more fuel. When they burn more fuel, shipping costs go up. When shipping costs go up, every company in America passes that cost to you. That shirt you ordered online, more expensive. That laptop, more expensive. Your grocery bill, more expensive because fresh produce flown in from Asia and Europe now takes longer and costs more to deliver. Then there is the stock market. Within hours of the announcement, American Airlines, Delta, United, FedEx, and UPS all saw their share prices drop. If you have a retirement account, a 401k, any investment in index funds, you are already losing money. This is not theoretical. Open your brokerage app right now. Look at the transportation sector. It is bleeding. But here is the layer that almost nobody is talking about, and this is what keeps Pentagon officials up at night. The United States military uses those exact same polar routes. Cargo planes carrying equipment to bases in Europe and Asia fly over Canada. Refueling tankers depend on Canadian airspace access. If this restriction extends to military overflight, or if Canada decides to charge the Department of Defense premium rates, we are looking at a national security vulnerability that did not exist 48 hours ago. The strategic implications are enormous. America is not just losing a trade dispute. America is losing its geographic advantage in the Northern Hemisphere. And if you think this is the worst card Canada has to play, wait until you hear what they have not used yet. What I am about to tell you should terrify every American policymaker sitting in Washington right now, because the airspace move, as devastating as it is, might just be the opening act. Canada has a handful of cards they have not even shown yet, and each one is more dangerous than the last. Start with energy. Most Americans have no idea how dependent the United States is on Canadian power. Canada supplies roughly 60% of all crude oil imports into the United States. Millions of barrels per day flowing through pipelines that cross the border into Michigan, Montana, Illinois, and beyond. Canadian hydroelectric power keeps the lights on in New York, New England, and the entire Pacific Northwest. If Carney decides to restrict energy exports or impose new pricing structures the same way he just did with airspace, entire regions of the United States could face power shortages and fuel price spikes that would make the 2022 gas crisis look like a warm-up. Now think about something even more strategic. Critical minerals. The batteries in your electric vehicle, the chips in your phone, the components in American fighter jets, they all require rare earth elements and critical minerals. Canada is one of the largest suppliers of these materials in the Western world: nickel, cobalt, lithium, uranium. The United States has been trying to reduce its dependence on China for these resources, and the backup plan has always been Canada. If that supply line gets weaponized, American manufacturing does not just slow down, it stops. Then there is the alliance factor, and this one is the sleeper threat nobody is discussing. Canada is a founding member of NATO. Canada is part of the Five Eyes intelligence sharing network alongside the United States, the United Kingdom, Australia, and New Zealand. These are the most sensitive security partnerships on Earth. If the relationship between Washington and Ottawa deteriorates beyond trade into genuine hostility, the intelligence sharing framework that protects America from terrorism and foreign espionage could develop cracks. Not because Canada would betray the alliance outright, but because trust erodes, communication slows, cooperation becomes transactional instead of automatic. And in the world of intelligence, a one-day delay in sharing critical information can be the difference between stopping an attack and missing it entirely. Airspace was the warning shot. Energy is the loaded gun. Critical minerals are the nuclear option, and the alliance is the foundation underneath all of it. Carney has not played those cards yet, but now every leader in Ottawa knows they exist. So what happens next? There are 3 scenarios, and one of them leads to a full-blown recession. Let me walk you through the 3 most likely outcomes of this crisis, because what happens in the next 48 hours could define the American economy for the rest of 2026. Scenario 1, Trump backs down. This is the rational move. The airline CEOs are already making phone calls. These are not small players. These are billion-dollar donors who funded campaigns and expect results. They are telling the White House in very clear terms, we are hemorrhaging money. Fix this now. In this scenario, Trump quietly drops the tariffs on Canadian steel and lumber, offers some kind of diplomatic olive branch, and Carney reopens the airspace. The problem is that Trump would have to admit he lost. He would have to stand in front of cameras and explain why he reversed course. For a man who has built his entire brand on never backing down, this is almost physically impossible. Could it happen? Yes. Will it happen? I would not bet on it. Would. Scenario 2, full escalation. Trump does what Trump does. He doubles down. He bans Air Canada from landing in American airports. He slaps new tariffs on every Canadian product he can think of. He goes on social media and calls Carney every name in the book. This is the nightmare scenario. Cross-border travel stops completely. Families separated. Business relationships severed overnight. The North American economy, the most integrated economic system on the planet, tears itself apart. In this scenario, analysts are projecting a recession hitting the United States within weeks, not months. Unemployment spikes. Consumer confidence collapses. And the worst part, Canada survives it better than we do, because they have already been quietly building trade relationships with Europe and Asia as a hedge against exactly this situation. Scenario 3, and this is the one I think actually plays out. The shadow deal. Trump sends someone to Ottawa, maybe a back-channel diplomat, maybe a business figure both sides trust. They sit down with Carney's team and negotiate a quiet resolution. Trump gets to go on television and say he secured a tremendous deal for the American people. Carney gets the tariffs removed and says nothing. Everyone saves face. The airspace reopens. But here is what most people will miss. Even in this best-case scenario, the damage is already permanent, because there is now a 4th scenario unfolding that nobody in Washington is prepared for. The rest of the world is watching, and they are taking notes. This is the part of the story that goes beyond Canada and the United States. This is about what the rest of the world just learned. For decades, the global order operated on one unspoken rule. You do not pick a fight with America because America is too big, too powerful, and too connected to lose. Countries accepted bad trade deals. They tolerated insults from Washington. They swallowed their pride because the cost of standing up to the United States was always greater than the cost of staying quiet. Mark Carney just proved that math is wrong. Every foreign minister in Europe watched what happened today. Every trade negotiator in Beijing took notes. Every policy advisor in Mexico City is running new calculations right now. They all just saw a country with 1/10 the population of the United States bring American aviation to its knees with a single policy change. No military, no sanctions, no threats, just leverage and the willingness to use it. That is a blueprint. And once a blueprint exists, it gets copied. Think about what happens if the European Union decides to play the same game. American tech companies depend on European data infrastructure. American pharmaceutical companies depend on European regulatory approval. What if Brussels decides to impose new digital sovereignty fees on American cloud services the same way Canada imposed airspace fees? Think about what happens if Mexico follows the blueprint. American auto manufacturers have spent 30 years building supply chains that cross the southern border dozens of times before a single car is finished. What if Mexico City decides to slow down customs processing by just 48 hours? Not a blockade, not a ban, just a delay. The cascading effect on American manufacturing would be catastrophic. This is the new reality. The United States is not self-sufficient. It has not been self-sufficient for half a century. America depends on allies for energy, for minerals, for airspace, for supply chains, for intelligence, for everything that makes the modern economy function. And the strategy of threatening those allies while assuming they will never fight back just collapsed in real time on live television. The world just learned that America has a single point of failure, and it is called geography. You cannot bully your way out of physics. You cannot tariff your way out of the map. And you cannot tweet your way out of the fact that the countries you depend on just realize they do not need you as much as you need them. Let me be clear about where we stand right now. The United States is locked out of the most critical air corridor on the planet. American airlines are burning billions in extra fuel costs. Your flights are getting more expensive by the hour. Your packages are slowing down. Your retirement savings are taking a hit. And the man responsible for starting this fight has no plan to end it. But the real danger is not what already happened. The real danger is what comes next. Canada has shown the world that America can be checked, that the biggest economy on earth has pressure points that a determined ally can exploit without firing a single shot. Every country that has ever been bullied by American trade policy is now asking the same question. If Canada can do it, why cannot we? That is the question no one in the White House has an answer for. Not today, maybe not ever. Because this is not a crisis you solve with a rally or a social media post. This is a structural vulnerability that has been building for decades, and it just got exposed to the entire world. So here is what I need you to do. If this video helped you understand what is really happening, hit subscribe right now. I am tracking this situation hour by hour, and the moment anything breaks, a deal, an escalation, a new move from Ottawa, you will see it on this channel first. Share this video with someone who still thinks this trade war is not going to affect them, because it will. Drop a comment and tell me which scenario you think plays out. I read every single one. This is the most dangerous economic standoff of 2026. The skies are closed, the price is climbing, and the clock is ticking. I will see you in the next update.